Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I am excited for today's video, but today we're going to be talking about my Pan That palette for this year, which is the ABH Sultry palette. And I have to say, I don't think I'll do a Pan That palette where I focus on one palette next year. I'm wondering if I do a quarterly Pan That palette and just try and hit pan on as many shades in a palette per quarter, but I just feel so like bored and burnt out. And granted, I will say we are heading into a season where I feel like I am going to feel more inspired to reach for this palette, but I have not had great progress on this summer. I do have a new completed shade though, which is really exciting. So we do have progress to share. I'm just like looking at this and I'm like, I don't know if Pan That palette is like the project for me. I like a little bit more variety in my life. But that being said, if you're interested in my progress on the ABH Sultry palette to see which new shade we completed and a better dip going in a couple of shades, stay tuned. First, if you have yet to subscribe to my channel and you like project panning content, palette themed content, or just chit-chatting about makeup, I'd love if you'd consider subscribing before moving on. And other than that, let's jump into the video. All right, you guys, I am terrible at taking like B-roll footage. Oh, I have hair in my mouth. I'm terrible at taking B-roll footage, but I will pop a picture on the screen of what this palette was looking like at the introduction. And then in the middle, I will try and post a picture of what the palette was looking like last month. And then at the bottom, I will post a picture of what this palette is looking like now. So as you can see, from start to finish, we have made a lot of progress in this palette. I know I am not like the most committed Pan That palette person, panner, because I feel like those who are super committed would have pan in every shade by now. But we do have a new completed shade, which I'm super excited about, which puts us up to 3 total completed shades. There are 4 total empty pans in my palette, but one of those is Bloom, which I frankened into a blush. So that's not a completed shade until I finish that blush, which Lord knows I don't know if I'll ever finish that. But as far as this palette is concerned, I still do have 4 shades that don't even have a pan yet. So we have Steampunk without a pan. We have Ember, which as we get into it, we'll see that Ember has a really, really good dip going on it. I actually have Ember on my outer like third of my eye today, and I was thinking I might hit pan on that shade today, but I didn't. That's okay. I think we can hit pan easily by the next update, because I've actually had fun mixing Ember just with like even I did like a dark mauve-y look and I put that in the outer corner and I actually really liked it. So I'm having fun finding ways to use Ember. Then we have Cinder still without a pan. I should be able to, honestly, I really should be able to hit pan on Cinder. I have also used Cinder on the inner third of my eye today. And I will say the shades in this palette, I feel like will be really complementary towards like fall and winter looks, or just the eyeshadow color schemes I like to wear in the fall and winter. And then we still have Cyborg without a pan, but I've actually been finding ways that I enjoy using Cyborg as well. So I don't know if I'll have pan on Cyborg next update. I mean, it would be really cool if I could hit pan on 4 shades for the next update, but alas, that is not the case for today's video. So just to jump into some quick stats, up until last update, I had reached for this palette a total of 125 times this year. Going into this year, this was already my most reached for palette, and I had already reached for this over 100 times in its lifetime with me. When I conclude this project, because I will be decluttering this palette no matter what it looks like at the end of the year, I will let you guys know how many total times I reached for this palette in its lifetime with me. I'll have to go back and do the math there, but I'm hoping to get over 300, which I think will be no problem. My goal is to reach for this at least 15 times per month for the rest of the year. I did reach this at a total of 19 times since the last update, so I'm at 144 uses for this year. I think 15 is a really achievable, really doable number. I would love to see me hit even higher than that, but I'm trying to also give myself the space and the leeway to reach for other things. But if I do a minimum of 15 times, that would get us over 200 uses on this palette in this year alone, which would be really exciting. So that being said, we will go shade for shade and I'll let you guys know where we are at in terms of progress per shade. So jumping into the first shade, the shade Fresh, I should have written down what month I ended up completing this shade, but I reached for this a total of 69 times this year to finish that off as a completed shade. Right next to that we have Pearl, which I believe I finished last month and was at 50 uses before I ended up completing the shade Pearl. Then we have Steampunk, which I have not reached for at all. Shame on me. I've said many times, gold is just not a color that I'm reaching for that much. Although I've seen some really beautiful like gold looks lately, and I'm like, maybe I need to play around with golds. So I think it would take at least 10 to 15 uses to hit pan on this. I have reached for this a total of 15 times this year, so I would have to like use it the amount of times I feel like that I've used it in the entirety of the year. So we'll see. I'm not sure about Steampunk. I'm not sure about having a pan on that by the next update. I can't find a way I want my hair to look. I can't see myself necessarily having a pan on that. It's possible, but I'm not committing to that. Moving on to Rose Quartz. Rose Quartz I also didn't reach for at all since the last update, and I am at 27 total uses on Rose Quartz. I thought Rose Quartz would be one of my most reached for shades, and it just hasn't been. However, I will say I'm getting back into like mauve looks, like dusty pink looks, and I feel like I could be reaching for, or could get myself to reach for, Rose Quartz quite a bit through the rest of the year. So I've said I would love for Rose Quartz to be a completed shade. I don't know that that's gonna happen. But I would love to have a much larger pan on this before the end of the year, and it would be cool if this could be a completed shade. I just don't necessarily know that that could happen. Then we have Ember. I reached for Ember a total of 4 times, which I feel like I've reached for Ember more than 4 times and just like forgot to mark. Because I feel like I made pretty decent progress in Ember, and I feel like I can like think of myself reaching for it more than 4 times. But we're just gonna go with the 4 tracked uses, which would put me at 25 total uses this year. I'm kind of surprised that I have almost the same amount of uses in Ember that I do Rose Quartz, because going into this year I was like, Ember is like one of my least used shades, one of the shades that I'm least excited about. But as mentioned, I've found ways that I really enjoy using Ember, and I've had fun with that. So I'm excited to continue to reach for Ember, and I am pretty confident Ember will be a pan for the next update. If it's not, I'll be really disappointed in myself. Okay, then we have the shade Bloom, which as mentioned, I have frankened this into a blush. I have it as a blush right here. And I don't know that we'll see any progress in this. I reached for this 1 additional time since the last update, putting me at 22 total uses this year. This is a blush I might keep. Yeah, I will. I had to like scrape off the top layer just because it was feeling really dry at the top. Now it doesn't feel quite as dry, and I think it's a really beautiful blush. I mixed it with this blush topper shade I had from Smashbox. There it is, swatched right there. And it does give a really beautiful kind of sunburnt look to the cheeks. But I'm not reaching for a shade or a blush shade like this that much in the fall time. Maybe I will this year, I'm really not sure. I would like to use this at least 8 more times to put me at a minimum of 30 uses by the end of the year. And granted, using it as a blush, I feel like I'm using more product than I am as an eyeshadow, but I would like to get a minimum of 8 more uses on that shade for a total of 30 uses this year. I feel like it's gonna be pathetic if I can't reach for each of these shades at least 30 times, but we'll get into a couple more shades that I'm like, I don't know if we're gonna make that happen. Okay, then moving on to the shade Birch. I'm so excited because Birch is officially a completed shade. It is our 3rd completed shade in this palette. I reached for Birch a total of 17 more times since the last update, putting me at 89 total uses in this project to complete that shade. So that is my most used shade thus far at 89 uses. I did actually end up my last 15 or so uses, I had frankened this into a bronzer, and I ended up using it as a bronzer for my last 15 or so uses, just so I could use it faster. I definitely didn't need to do that because I have so many other bronzers I feel like I've been working on this year, but I just wanted another completed shade. I wanted something to be excited about, so that is our 3rd completed shade. My only hesitation now is I still do have 4 matte shades left in this palette, but I really do not reach for Slate and Noir at all. Twig, I could reach for more. I definitely could. And then Dystopian is just like not a good quality brown. Like, it's definitely old, it's dry. It's like dry as the Sahara Desert. So I really feel like this is just a companion palette for me now, mostly for like shimmer shades. But Birch is officially complete, which we're super excited about. Moving on to the shade Cinder. I did reach for Cinder only one time, which was today. Cinder, so this palette had fallen on the floor and quite a bit of Cinder kind of chunked out and broke out. It didn't create a pan, but the product is really, really thin kind of throughout the entire pan. So I feel like with a little bit of effort, I could make a really large pan in this palette. And I do feel like this is a shade I could see myself getting a lot of use out of as we go into the end of the year. I feel like this could also be something that I could experiment with a little bit more and not just commit this shade to like round looks like I have today. Like I feel like I could play around with that shade with mauve tone looks, or just like try something different. Like I need to maybe just start to think a little bit outside the box with this to make the palette a little bit more interesting to me. So if you guys have recommendations or like combinations, like maybe fun different combinations you want to see me try, let me know. Let me know. Moving on to the shade Twig. I'm actually really surprised by this, but I reached for Twig 4 times. I'm only at 19 uses for Twig this year, which I just don't necessarily know if I believe that, because I feel like if you look at where Twig was at the beginning of the year versus where it is now, I feel like the pan has expanded a decent amount. And I feel like I've reached this more than 19 total times. So I'm gonna continue to try and get use out of Twig. On days that I'm like rushing out the door, I can just toss Twig in the crease and I really can make it work, especially as we head into the colder months and perhaps I self-tan a little bit less and have a little bit less color. So the cool tone kind of like matches what I naturally look like a little bit more. I don't know. I don't necessarily know that I could finish Twig off unless maybe I depotted this and used it as a contour, but I can't even get myself to reach for my Kevin Aquan contour. So I don't necessarily know that that'll happen. We'll just see what happens with this shade. I'll be very curious to see where we're at with Twig next update. I'd love to reach for Twig 11 times between this update and the next, which would put me at 30 uses for Twig. And just to kind of see where the pan's at that 30 uses. We'll see. That should be a goal. But every time I set goals for myself in this project specifically, it just never seems to work out. So it's a goal, but it's not like a hard goal. Then moving on to the shade Teak. Teak surprises me that we have such a big pan on Teak. This is also a shade that I just didn't feel like would get a ton of use when I started this project at the beginning of the year, just because it's more of like a mid-toned bronzy shade, and sometimes in the past I've struggled to reach for that, but I have Teak all over like the center of the lid today, and that's really where I like to use this shade. And I found myself reaching for this even to mix with other like bronze looks that I'm doing with other palettes. So I've reached for Teak an additional 5 times since the last update, putting me at 38 total uses in Teak. I would like to reach, maybe I could give myself a goal of reaching for Teak 12 times is kind of a lot. Like I feel like I do still want to have fun with my eyeshadow, but 12 times maybe, because that would put me at 50 total uses for Teak. That would be exciting. And maybe my goal should be like maybe my goal should be to hit side pan on Teak, because I feel like we're getting really, really thin over there. 12 uses or side pan on Teak. That maybe will be like a soft goal as well for this next month. Then we're moving on to Dystopian, which is the driest dark brown eyeshadow I've ever used. I used it as a bottom like lash line, and I use it to fill in my hairline sometimes, because I feel like I've used Dystopian so many times throughout its lifetime, but it does get hard pan, and I used to use it primarily as just like an eyebrow filler. And so I don't know if it's just like because I used it in that way and it had really bad hard pan because of like brow gel and stuff, I don't know. But I feel like this pan has not moved at all, and I reached for Dystopian 3 additional times since the last update. I'm at 54 total uses on Dystopian, and I'm like looking at it now, I can tell there's like a pretty large dip in the center of this shade. So I'm like, is it gonna be where I finally hit pan, like the pan just like kind of explodes and I have this huge pan there? I honestly don't know. I'm gonna continue to reach for it, but this is like the slowest moving shade of life. This is my 4th most used shade. No, this is my 3rd most used shade, because I have now used it more times than I used Pearl. But geez Louise, it is taking for freaking ever to make any sort of progress in Dystopian. Then moving on to Cyborg. I did have fun trying to use Cyborg with some of those like dusty pink looks that I was doing, and I actually really enjoyed the 2 looks that I incorporated this shadow into, and I'm excited to continue to kind of think outside the box with this one as well and continue to use this one. But I did reach for Cyborg 2 times since the last update, putting me at 16 total uses. I'd like to reach for this at least 5 times and maybe get over that 50 hurdle, or not 50, that 20 mark by the next update. That's only 4 uses. Like, come on, Steph, you can do that. You can do that. So that should be like a soft goal there. So moving on to Slate, I didn't reach for Slate at all. This is like the shadow that I've struggled with the most. I only have a pan on this because I frankened it with another shade. That did not go well. I don't even know where that shade has like ended up. I'm like, maybe I threw it out and I just don't remember. But I've only reached for Slate 7 times. I kind of want to just like remove Slate, and I might actually do that just because I don't use a, like, I just do not use a gray. There's no circumstance where I'm like excited to reach for a gray. So I might actually just like take that shadow out just so it's not like an eyesore in there and a reminder to me that like I'm failing completely at that shade. I think I might do that for the next update. So you'll see that as an empty pan, but like not one that I obviously completed by any means, but I just don't really care to have that in there. And it just like honestly annoys me to look at. I feel like if I didn't have that shade, I would like looking at this palette a lot more, honestly. I don't know if it means I would use it more, but I would like looking at it more. And then finally we have the shade Nior, which is that black. I do not reach for a black shadow, rarely ever. So all of my uses have really been me like really making a conscious effort to reach into that shade. But I have reached for Nior 2 total times since the last update, putting me at 15 total uses in this project. I would like to, between now and the end of the year, again, find 15 additional times that I can reach for this to at least get me to that 30 use goal. And I really do try and use this to like as an upper liner. So I'm like, with a concentrated brush, I should be able to hit pan on this, I feel like, before the end of the year. I really love for that to happen. But that is it for today's update. That is my progress on all of those shades. Not super exciting, but very happy to have another completed shade. And I think for next update, I will definitely have at least 1 new pan and ember. I think I should have at least a pan and ember and a pan and cinder. I would love to see side pan and teak. We'll see what we can do with twig. And then I would like to see at least a little bit of pan expansion is in rose quartz. I am feeling more excited to reach into this palette as we enter September than I felt excited to reach for this the entire summer. This is just not a summer palette to me. I would love your guys' feedback and opinions on what you think I should do for my, like, should I do a quarterly pan that palette, or just try and hit as many pans in a palette? I've like, I've gone back and forth so much on what I want to do, because I want to do some kind of like pan that palette, but I don't want to commit to just one palette throughout the entirety of the year. So I would love your guys' feedback below. Should I pick like 4 chopping block palettes, use them for a quarter, and then hit as many pans and be like ready to say goodbye? I feel like I say I want to do that, but I don't know if I'd be ready to actually say goodbye. We'll see. We'll see. I want your guys' input down below. Thank you guys so much for sticking around to watch today's video and for supporting my channel. As you guys always do, I love you guys so much, and I will catch you in my next video. Bye.